with the Chicago Bulls and the reported interest to move up in this draft. We're going to talk about, is this a draft to move up for the Chicago Bulls and why it's a higher reward than really risk, depending on what the Bulls are giving up to move up for. And we're also going to dive into the mailbag. All that and more right after this.
You are now tuned in to Chicago Bulls Central, your number one place for all Chicago Bulls news and content.
What's going on, Bulls fans? Welcome to another episode of Chicago Bulls Central, your number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at Bulls Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that being said, let's go ahead and get into this content today, y'all. So the Bulls, we dropped an emergency breaking news video over on the YouTube channel for those that are listening to the podcast side. After the ESPN reported that the Chicago Bulls are looking to move up at the right price, with the reported interest being Matas Buzelis. And, you know, of course, this raised a lot of questions from Bulls fans on why would the Bulls really be looking to move up in this draft of all drafts, right? And I think it comes down to a couple of different things, right? You want to strike while the iron is hot, right? Especially if the Bulls do see some talent in this draft that they believe can develop. And keep in mind, this is Arturas Karnisovas was part of the front office that drafted Nikola Jokic, right? But the problem there is that this is a draft that many people do view as weaker. Now, we've debunked the conversation around weak drafts before, right? It really comes down to talent, and of course, they're projecting star-level talent. That doesn't mean it's not going to be some pretty damn good starters and maybe even some stars to still come out of this draft. You know, I've talked a lot heavily on the 2020 draft being a draft that was reported as being a weak draft in a number of years, and that draft ended up bringing a pretty damn deep draft on top of all of that. So when it comes down to it, you got to ask yourself the risk, right? The risk versus reward in trading up for the Chicago Bulls. And the targets that we've heard so far, them potentially trading up for, bring its own risk and reward down to. Like when you look at when it was initially reported that the Bulls would be open to moving up to draft Donovan Klintman. Now, Klintman is a player that has his flaws on top of it, right? He comes from a college that really spread everything out. So, you know, people look at, oh, well, he didn't have a huge number of points, so why are we going after that? But he does offer a young center who has still tremendous offensive upside and some passing ability to be maybe a point forward type center for you at some point in time. But then you get into Matas Buzelis. Now, this is the type of player that I do think is worth trading up for. Now, there is some risk, and you talk about risk versus reward, in a player that ends up being just as good as Matas Buzelis being there at number 11. And that's where it gets into what the Bulls are moving to get up, to move up in this draft. Are they keeping their own number 11 pick? Or are they in moving a player like Alex Caruso? Or are they getting something as part of a Zach LaVine trade, something like that? Or are they packaging their own number 11 overall pick with an asset to then move up to number 3 with the Houston Rockets, or move up in general in the draft? And I think that's going to be the thing that really determines this, right? Now, we do have a voicemail from Corner in regards to trading Alex Caruso, so we'll talk about that a little bit. But it really comes down to what are you giving to move up, and then what are you holding on to? If the Bulls walk away from this draft, as we talked about in yesterday's episode, with 2 picks in this draft, I don't think that's the worst thing possible. Now, you do have some asset allocation questions as far as, hey, would you more so want to gear towards getting a 2025 first-round pick? And that's where the questions lie in there as well, right? So this is a draft where I can see a lot of teams moving either up or down because of the player that they have number 1 on their board and where that player may end up going in a draft like this. And so because of that, that's where things can get a really interesting in this draft process for the Chicago Bulls, because if you do have a team that is sitting there, I'm just going to throw a number out. So I'm not looking at the teams, I'm just throwing a number out. But let's say you have a team at number 6 there that thinks, oh no, we can get the guy that we really like in this draft. We can probably get them at 15 or 16. And if the Bulls see a guy that they want that they don't think is going to be there at number 11, I'm not too mad at them moving up in a case like that either. It really just comes down to what exactly are the parameters of the deal for the Chicago Bulls. And, you know, that's the answer that we don't have right now. We have general talk around the Bulls being willing to trade up in the draft, move up in the draft for the right price. And I'm glad hearing in the right price, right? Because this is the type of draft that even if you do have a prospect that you really would be interested in moving up for, if you have to give up too much to do it, it doesn't necessarily make sense with some of the high upside picks in a draft like this as well. So the Bulls moving up, it's going to be something to watch out for if we eventually do it, right? And I don't know how that's going to happen or if it's going to happen for sure. This is a front office that is very difficult to get a grasp and feel on exactly kind of what their motivations and willingness to give up certain things for. This is the same team that gave up a first-round pick to sign DeMar DeRozan that was lottery protected that ends up like may not be able to hold on to, right? This is a team that, gave up 2 first-round picks for Nikola Vucevic, right? So you don't know how that. Right now, as I said in, I think, the emergency episode, I said it in, this has been a front office that is almost overpaid for everything that they've brought into this team, either trade or free agent wise. So because of that history here, I'm not looking at the history in Denver or anything like that, but because of the history here, it brings about its own questions. Now, Matas Buzelis, as I talked about, is a damn good draft prospect in this draft. He has, some people think he can go top 3, top 4, right? And we talked a lot about his skill. Go back and look at the draft video where I broke down everything because I'm not going to get into that high level about him. But this is also a hometown kid. Even though he's Lithuanian, he was born in Chicago, right? Went to high school in Chicago, was raised in Chicago. So, not to say that should matter at all, but this isn't like your typical international prospect that has to acclimate to being in the States or American basketball or something like that. This guy was a high-level recruit coming out of high school, but he opted to go to the G League Unite to make a little bit of money right now, right? Instead of going into college. And, there's a lot of people that do that. But but if you're going to move up in a draft, hearing names like Tajon Saloon, hearing names like Matas Buzelis, right? These are guys that I'm not mad if the Bulls try to trade up for because they're super young, super raw, and if they end up hitting and developing for you, you could have a star level player out of those guys. Now, the question that the Bulls have to ask themselves is, with Matas Buzelis, if they have to move up for him, but a player like Tajon Saloon, who has some of the same similar rawness and upwards and potential and things like that, people do rate Buzelis as having a higher potential, but Tajon Saloon is another one. If he does end up falling to you, if he's there, then do you just go ahead and keep your own pick, right? So it's a lot of those questions around the potential of moving up, and I don't think we're going to have the answer until draft night. There's going to be a lot of rumors, a lot of possibilities, and AK should damn well be on the phone between now and draft night heavily. I like AK should be pounding the pavement, him and Mark Eversley, to do all the research. But to hear that the Bulls privately worked out Buzelis in LA, I think there is some smoke to that fire. Now, that smoke does not necessarily mean that they're willing to trade up a bunch of assets to get him. It definitely shows and points towards interest there, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're willing to give up assets to move on from him. And that's the risk versus reward nature of potentially moving up in what is labeled a weaker draft. I don't think this is going to, if you guys can't tell by the way I've been talking about it, I don't think when it's all said and done, this draft is going to be viewed as a weak draft. I think 3, maybe 4 years down the road, we're going to go back and look at the 2024 draft and say, oh man, they were calling that draft weak, but this guy turned into this guy turned into that. I would not be surprised at that at all. And that's why I've tried to do my best to kind of elaborate and to educate people on when they label something a weak draft, what it actually means as far as the potential aspect of it. But I think that this is a draft that has a lot of players with a lot of potential that could hit and maybe not be superstars, maybe not even be stars. But I do think there are going to be a lot of players who look at this and they're going to be very solid starters in the NBA that could still make impacts. And so hope that the Bulls just get it right. That's the overall thing in this. If the Bulls do trade up, no matter what they have to give up to trade up, if they hit on it, then we're not questioning it, right? That's the biggest thing, and that's what I keep going back to with this draft and with this front office. You just have to get it right. Get it right. You have to hit on this. And it may not mean that in year 1 we think that it's a hit, but when it's all said and done and the development comes and things like that, we have to look back at the next few draft picks by this front office, and they have to hit on those picks. That's the most important thing to me. But you guys, as always, can let me know what you think down below on that. But with that said, let's go ahead and get into the mailbag portion of this episode, as it is Saturday. It is mailbag day. This first voicemail, this one's from Corn.
Hey, what's the word, King? It's Corn. Let's get right into it. Saw the episode yesterday. Very interesting trade up scenario. That is, you kind of cleared it up. Would I trade AC to Houston for the number 3? Said it before on my last message. Right now, I wouldn't. And I know that's going to probably piss off some people, irritate some people. But listen, the reason why I will wait for the deadline for Caruso, like everybody say, 2025 draft is the draft to really put all of your eggs in the bunch, as they say, right? So that's what I would not do. I would not trade Caruso for the number 3 pick for Klintman. I'll stay at number 11, and I will pick a Filipowski or Edie. Or if a Ware there. I like Khalil Ware, but we already talked about the motor issue with him. Now, the salary cap. King, you the best when it comes to that, man. If people don't, us Bulls fans, and I'm part of it, some of us is damn slow idiot. Most of us is high as fuck. But at the same goddamn time, man, when it comes to you, how you explain the salary cap, I'm a novice when it comes to that. I'm a complete casual when it comes to that. When it comes to scouting players and shit like that, I'm good at that. But when it comes to salary cap talk, I lean towards that, because you are the only content creator that I know, Bulls-wise, that I know that speaks on the salary cap eloquently like you do. So, King, for those who don't get, because I totally get what you say when you speak on the salary cap every time that you speak on it. But as Bulls fans, man, we're slow sometimes, man. We're just slow. And I ain't gonna lie, I'm part of that group. But like I said, man, I always appreciate that, man, when you explain that, man. And you always great at that to me. You know what I'm saying? Like I said, man, you are the GOAT at this shit. You know how I feel about that, man. And that's about it, King. Love you like always, man. Appreciate you. See Red Nation always. Blessings.
Shout out to Cornelius there. Not trading Caruso for a pick in the 2024 draft and waiting until the deadline to get a 2025 draft pick. I don't hate that, right? And I think the thing overarchingly is that when I talk about like moving Caruso, is that I would love Caruso to stay here. That would be my first thing. He's a culture guy. He's a guy that I always like. He's the type of guy that we love here in Chicago, right? So I would love Alex Caruso to stay here. But also, in respect of where the Bulls are and the talent influx that we need, considering Alex Caruso's is going to be 30, I can understand if they do move him. Now, the threat of moving and waiting to the trade deadline, Corn, is what if Caruso gets hurt, which is something that we do happen, and that happens a lot to Alex Caruso. And then a team isn't willing to give up a 2025 first-round pick because they're only getting a half a season. If Alex Caruso had longer left on his contract, I do think, regardless, you're going to get a first-round pick even at the trade deadline. But if he's banged up, if a lot of different things happen, you could end up not getting anything for Alex Caruso and then maybe walking away with nothing. And that's why I do think that the Bulls may have to look to extend Alex Caruso as soon as possible if they don't trade him at the draft, because if you get him an extension, you get him locked in, either he's staying here for a long time or the team that does trade for him, if you do make a move at the trade deadline, is then getting more years on that deal. So I think there's a lot of things that can play into it. And you're right. Alex Caruso is such a good commodity for the Chicago Bulls. One of our most valued assets with the highest value is that if you can get a 2025 pick, and like I've said before, even if the 2025 pick is 18 to 21, that's almost the talent that's going to be in next year's draft. That's almost like having a top 15 pick in this draft. So that's it. The Bulls got to look at it again, risk versus reward aspect of it, and we'll see what they do. As far as the salary cap talk, hey, this is what I love to do, man. I love to get into the weeds and stuff like that. And, I always also like to add clarity. And so many people talk about the Bulls salary cap situation as if it's just dire either way around. No, it's only dire if they're trying to keep this team together. If they're willing to let DeMar walk or trade Zach and don't take back as much salary, they can free up more than enough salary cap to sign the players they want to keep and maybe even use their full mid-level exception. So it just comes down to that. And, I'm glad that I'm able to add that clarity for people because, people do talk about, other outlets do talk about it as just the certainty of, the Bulls are just right up against the luxury tax. And that can be confusing to some fans because they're not going to go look at it at salary cap sheet and look at the different scenarios, right? So that's my job here, is to add some of that clarity, and I love doing it, man. But thanks, Corn. I love you too, brother. Let's go ahead and get into the next voicemail. This one's from Vaughn.
What's up, Hayes? This is Vaughn. So my last voicemail about building out the rotation. I'll be thinking ahead, but I probably was too literal in the point that I was trying to make. So really, I just feel like the front office needs to just solidify a plan with the next version of the team that they want to see. So, I feel like a lot of times, the initial plan, they would usually have, Billy would like to go one on, one off with Zach and DeMar, to keep the offense flowing in that type of way. And I feel like as DeMar and Booch, they age, I think they should be more pieces as, that solid type of veteran presence, I guess, more so DeMar that you want in the rotation. And I feel like they should try that one off, one on type of thing with the rotation that they use between Kobe and Io. So, let them share point guard duties instead of getting a point guard off the bench, so to say. It's still cool to have depth at that. I'm sure we're stuck with Javon Carter. Maybe he'll have a better season next year, but even so, I wouldn't look for him to get many minutes off the bench. So I think that they would do some good having Kobe and Io switch at the point guard duties, one on, one off, and then we could allow more wings to play in the rotation. So that would allow someone like Dalen Terry to get more minutes, which I think is super vital to his development. I think we're at the point where we just start focusing on something like that, even if it's like just a ninth man. But that also kind of brings up, as much as I love Caruso, maybe it is beneficial to move on from him because it'll bring you draft capital while also freeing up minutes for the young guys that we need to see at this point. Like, we need to see what Dalen Terry has. We need to see what Julian Phillips has. Like I said, even if it's a ninth man in the rotation, we need to get that. So I think the front office needs to have a vision, build the roster out with that vision, and prioritize letting those young guys, Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips, with big question marks, have opportunities to showcase what they can do, and don't rely on someone like Lonzo to come back. He's not going to start. So, at best, he's maybe a spot minutes guy, take over the Javon Carter role as like a 10th man. You feel me? And play the occasional spot backup minutes for point guard. But other than that, I think they need to have a vision and try to figure out a way to carve out some type of rotational minutes for one of Dalen Terry and Julian Phillips, or both if possible. But let me know what you think. All right, peace.
Listen, I don't disagree with you. Solidifying a plan for what they want to do with this team needs to be the first thing that they decide on this offseason. Decide a path and actually see that path through. They came in here and wanted to go the path of development through the draft and things like that, and then traded for Nikola Vucevic, and then immediately win now, right? So you got to pick a path. And I think that is what this front office does in this offseason, is make that path more clear. And we'll see what they come down to with that one, man. As far as the Kobe and Io sharing the ball, yeah, I think that's what we've seen. Sharing ball handling duties. I won't say sharing point guard duties, because I think those guys play really good. They have a great chemistry playing next to each other. But sharing the ball handling duties, and that's kind of the benefit of having two guys like a Io and a Caruso, and a Kobe out there together, right? So I think that's the biggest part of that, is that it adds so much flexibility. And then if you do end up getting like a Mattis Bucilis or somebody who can develop into a point forward type, and then you're looking at three players in that lineup that can all kind of share the ball and thing, and ball handle and run the offense and stuff like that. That's where you get into a more modern offense, even if you don't have 3-point shooting, that could make this team dangerous. So I would love to absolutely see that. Now, as far as Dalen Terry getting more minutes and moving off of Caruso to open more minutes moving off from Caruso theoretically would do that depending on what you do. But I think that this season is going to tell us a lot about how the Bulls actually view Dalen Terry in the future. Because if he's still struggling to find minutes coming into the season, I just think that means the Bulls probably don't think he's that good. And I'm not saying that that's my mindset, but I think that that's what the Bulls would be telling us in a case like that. And I'm not even saying that they have to move on from Caruso to do that. But if Dalen Terry is not part of the rotation to start the season next year, going into his third year in the league, we're not even talking about him like having a big role in the offense or anything. I'm just saying has a role on the team as far as getting an even consistent 10 to 12 minutes. To me, that would say that maybe they just don't think he's that good. And we'll see if they're right or wrong on that one. But great voicemail there, Vaughn. Thank you for calling in. Let's get into this next one. This one is from TJ.
Yo, what's up, Hayes? It's TJ. I know it's been a while, but I got a question. So I know there isn't a lot of buzz around the Bulls on whether they'll be moving up in the draft or moving back. So I was wondering if they was to move up in the draft, who would you want them to pick? And also, what spot do you think they should move up to get? And same for vice versa. Like, if they were to move back, how far back do you think they should move? What assets do you think they should try and retain while they're moving back? And yeah. One last thing. I feel like personally, it wouldn't be the end of the world like a lot of people may think if the Bulls aren't able to get rid of Zach LaVine this offseason. I feel like it wouldn't be the end of the world. I feel like he can still have the time. He still has time to boost his trade value even before the actual season starts. Like, he could, I don't know, bump up his trade value during the preseason or something. I don't know. But, yeah, that's just it, man. Hope you and everybody else listening having a blessed day. And, yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great question as far as the Bulls moving up. Like I said, if they move up, Matas Bucilis is a great option there, right? I think that he would be a really good one to kind of move up for. I didn't even hate them necessarily moving up for Donovan Klintman, just because I think that that's them aggressively going after a player at a position of need that clearly that would say that they have him ranked probably as number one on their draft board. So I'm not too mad at that either. It really depends on what, like I said in the opening segment, what do you have to give up to move up? And that could also determine what you're looking for, because if you give up at Alex Caruso, if Zach LaVine is part of that trade, or anything like that, that really then opens up that maybe you are going guard. But Tejan Saloon is not a bad one there if he isn't falling to you. Matas Bucilis isn't a bad one there. Nikola Topic, who's another one that's been mentioned, isn't a bad one there, but he has the ACL injury, so I think I think he's kind of destined to go to the Spurs too. They have the number 8 pick, number 8 and number 4. I think they're going to get Topic there. They have history with foreign prospects as well, and he can be that point guard and lob point guard as well for Wemby. So I think he's kind of destined to go there. But those are the guys I'm really looking at moving up opportunities. So we'll see. We'll see. But I think I don't have like a framework of a deal, because this is such a difficult thing to do as far as like in this type of draft. So we'll see, brother. But as far as your second question, would it be the end of the world if the Bulls ended up holding on to LaVine? It depends on what else they do, because you are like let's not make any mistake. The luxury tax and being up close to that and still being able to fill out a solid team is a factor in this. And so I don't think it's the end of the world per se, but I don't think it's ideal for what the Bulls are trying to do, or what it seems like they're trying to do. But if Zach LaVine ends up staying on the Chicago Bulls, then he just has to play well. Hopefully he's motivated to that point by the fact that, hey, nobody sees the value in you. Let's get this done, right? So, yeah, he's still a chance that he can increase his trade value, but I also think there's a greater chance that he hurts it than helps it, just because it's easier to hurt your value than to help your value. So, great voicemail, though, there, TJ. Thank you for calling in, brother. Let's get into this next one. This one's from Oscar.
Hey, it's Oscar here. Just finished hearing your Mark Eversley episode, and I couldn't agree more, man. The team, I'm hoping, and I'm optimistic, but I don't want to hold my breath with this team, because we seem to make the same mistakes over and over. But like you said, if we're gonna start this year, and like I said in my previous voicemail, this year is a year where we're gonna start Pat at the 3, and we're gonna keep all these young guys, and we're gonna let these guys actually get a chance to see what they have. Man, I'm not opposed to it, man. It's better than fucking making the same stupid mistake over and over by paying these older guys money and letting these young guys walk. As far as Devin Carter, man, the kid is exactly what I always call about and complain about, that we don't draft guys that look ready to come into the league. This kid reminds me different. He's smaller but Jamie Hawkins, a little older, but the guy can play. And this guy is a dog on the defensive end. He's a good 3-point shooter. And he looks like he's ready to come into the league and hit the ground running. And I want to know your thoughts about, I know you spoke about Tejan Saloon at 11, but I don't think we'll take him at 11. But what do you think about Bobby Klintman, 6'10" wing, very similar to Tejan Saloon, and a good 3-point shooter, and has the tools that, like you said, we're looking for that diamond in the rough. Let me know what you think, man. Thank you for the time.
Listen, Oscar, this is one of your best voicemails, because you hit the thing that I'm going to pull out of what you said there is that keeping older players while letting younger players walk for free. right? That's the thing in this. And keeping older players isn't bad, right? And letting young players sometimes walk away isn't bad either. The problem is that the Bulls have held on to old guys, or some of their younger players have gone away and thrived, and you can only be on the wrong end of that so many times. Every team is going to be on the wrong end of that at some point in their history. It's going to happen to every team. But you don't want to continually be that team that keeps missing out because you're holding on to older players and then your young players actually develop somewhere else. You can't keep being the team that does that. Eventually, you have to stop that and develop your own players if you want to build something sustainable. And that's what we hope is going to happen, man. They got to stop the bleeding there, and they got to start developing, hitting on some of these draft picks, developing some of these guys, and really seeing what they have in them. Hopefully, the growth of Kobe and Io last year kind of reminded them, hey, we came into this saying we wanted to build through the draft. Let's start actually investing more in our young players. And the question is Billy Donovan the coach to do that? Now, as far as Bobby Klintman, this is a guy that I did cover in one of my draft videos there, Oscar, but he's a guy that would be a reach for the Bulls at number 11. Most mocks have him going late 20s. Some even have him going in early in the second round. He is a guy at being 21 years old. I think if he was like 18, 19, he probably would be more like a top 15 pick. But he's a guy that's still raw. He's a two-way player, very versatile. I like him. I do think he's going to be a better NBA player than international player. This guy has a ton of potential, especially as a switchable defender. Has some good offensive upside, more as a lob threat, things like that. He has a super high floor, and that's the type of players, especially in the 20s, that you want. It's super high floor players. I like Bobby Klintman a lot, man. I think he's going to be a player that we can look back on, and it's probably going to end up being decent. Nice size as well, at being 6'9" with a 6'11" wingspan. Can pass okay enough, right? So I really do like him. I really like him a lot in this draft. That's a really good call out there, Oscar. I just think it'd be a reach for where the things seem like they're going in this draft, but we'll see. Let's get into the last voicemail for today. This one's from Reginald.
Hey, this is Reginald from Columbus. I was just listening to you talk about how some people think Billy Donovan might not be as bad as a coach as he thinks he is, but in my opinion, I think he might be worse for us. Simply because I don't see anyone looking to really make the argument that he's actually a good coach or even average. I mean, how many times have we seen him go up against lesser quality teams and literally just get out coached, whether it was Houston or Oklahoma City or whoever from a few years back till now. And then when you look at teams he had in the past where he did have superstars and they got literally beat with nothing. Right now, when I look at this Bulls team, I just see guys either aren't being played or aren't being played in the right position. And I know some people be like, well, that's not his fault. He's getting hurt. And not seeing the players get hurt. And that's true. But then we see Eric Spoelstra take a team to the finals with 7 undrafted players. Or then we see time where other coaches coach their teams in winning seasons, probably having guys out of position. We also saw about guys like Derrick Jones Jr., who kept being played out of position, but didn't mind that. But the problem was not that he wasn't just playing out of position, that he couldn't get any minutes. Just did a report about how the main problem wasn't the money, is that he wasn't getting time on the court, so what he could do while he left Dallas. Now we wanted him to do big things, and we're sitting at home hoping that Bulls do something in the draft. So I just see Billy Donovan as a guy who got over at a different time with a different, better team, but never could get over the hump against Golden State and LeBron James and all those other guys. He really can't name any of the major coaches that he could beat one-on-one in the playoffs. So I think it's time for the Bulls to move past Billy. Thanks. What's your opinion?
Billy Donovan is always an interesting topic because there are some people that defend him, right? They look at the state of the team, they look at, the age of the team, and they say, well, this, and I think people have two different conversations. Asking if Billy Donovan is the right coach for this team doesn't mean that he's the only problem or the cause for all the Bulls' problems. I think some people kind of look at it, if you talk about it, and say, well, you're making him, all the problems aren't Billy Donovan. And you're right, they're not. Roster construction has played a part in that. Injuries have actually played a part in that. But I don't think It's somewhere in the middle. He's not a terrible head coach. He's not a great head coach. But that doesn't mean he's a good coach for this team, right? And that's the biggest thing that they have to really look at it. There are plenty of arguments to make for Billy Donovan on some things that he does well. There are plenty of arguments to make for Billy Donovan on things he doesn't do good at all. And I think that eventually you have to ask yourself, and this is what the front office has to ask themselves, have we put a roster good enough together where we believe in the guys and we just don't think this is the coach for the guys? And until they get to the point of that realization, I don't know if Billy Donovan ever leaves the Chicago Bulls because he's in with the Reinsdorfs. But we'll see. A great voicemail there from Reginald. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. Make sure you guys are following the show at Bull Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns. BullCentralPod@gmail.com. Lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We are the number one spot for everything Chicago Bulls related, thanks to you guys. And like I like to end every episode on, go Bulls. Love you guys. See red if you can, y'all. Peace.
This has been a presentation of the Break Media.